Here's the news, everyone. The government shutdown was clearly bad for business, and that's coming back to haunt some of the Republicans who brought Washington to a standstill. Senator Mike Lee of Utah is facing backlash in his home state, where the closure of national parks put a dent in the local economy. A former top finance staffer for Mitt Romney's campaign tells the Washington Post, quote, "Business leaders that I talked to, many of whom supported Senator Lee, would never support his re-election and, in fact, will work against him, myself included." The director of polling at Brigham Young University is quoted in today's Wall Street Journal saying in part this: "Lee looks vulnerable to a challenge from within his party, but the real danger could be a challenge in a general election from the right kind of moderate Democrat." The article goes on to say neither Mr. Lee nor the state GOP are showing signs of thriving financially, as many of the big state donors look elsewhere. That speaks to a larger trend where Democratic super PACs and campaign committees have far outpaced their Republican counterparts. Look at the numbers.
By the way, that's a fallout. That is also a fallout. You can't just blame it on the governmental shutdown. A lot of guys, mainly rich guys, gave a lot of money to Karl Rove. And they heard a lot of promises through election night, not just from Karl Rove, but from everybody. Robert Gibbs, hey, Republicans are winning, and the media is biased, and they're not telling you the truth. And these polls, look at the front of Drudge and the Gallup poll, right, and da-da-da-da-da. Which, you know, if you're writing those huge checks they were writing, and then it ends up that your guys got it all wrong, so, yes.
Makes the next day's call a little awkward.
Yeah, and put those numbers up again. These numbers
they're according to the Center for Responsive Politics.
And they're very bad in part because of what's been going on over the past 6 months. But there's a bigger problem. Republicans are going to have to regain the trust of a lot of their biggest donors.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the jobs figures show the impact to the economy. And poll after poll now have shown us what the impact is writ large with the public. And this was not what people bargained for. They understand it wasn't worth it, and it didn't have to happen. And all it did was inflict damage on the economy and on the Republican brand. Yeah. And it's going to take a while.
Well, you know, Caddy, we've got a lot of polls that are coming up in the next minute or two, but it does bear repeating that, you know, people ask, when is this? Yeah, these people aren't afraid of anything. They're going to keep acting in ways that hurt the Republican Party and the conservative. No, they are actually afraid of something. They're afraid of big money donors saying, enough, we're going to fund somebody who's pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-business. And they're going to run against you. This whole thing, this whole primary thing, it works both ways. And if you get somebody who's pro-life and pro-gun and pro-family, as they would define it, and all of these other things, you know, they're the ones looking vulnerable. They're the ones who can be tagged with costing people jobs.
Yeah, and in a sense, the breaking moment in the whole debt ceiling government shutdown fiasco was when the Chamber of Commerce said, you know what, guys, we're actually not going to back you.
And the Koch brothers.
And if you carry on doing things that hurt our business interests, that hurt the American economy, that take us this far along the road of government dysfunction, we will find people and we will fund them to run against you. And I think that's such an interesting question for the next few weeks in the run-up to the next shutdown showdown in January, is what happens to the money? Does the money decide that the Tea Party that's been created is actually not in the best interest of the people that may have been funding it initially? Do they want to shift? Do they want to find people that can actually win? And what happens to the opinion polls as well? I mean, if you're starting to see people like Ted Cruz losing clout in the opinion polls, and you're starting to see Mike Lee suffering in the opinion polls, it's going to send a real. This could be the thing that breaks the deadlock in the ability of Washington to run itself.
So many people that have, you know, that gave me money from the beginning. We're small versions of these business people that you see on national news. And by the way, the only thing they care about, they want lower taxes, they want lower regulations, and they want the federal government out of their way. But they're not crazy. They want a strong business environment, and they don't want people running around shutting down the government every 3 months.
Especially, Willie, for a goal that was impossible.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that ended up with a presidential veto no matter what, so that it literally accomplished nothing. I mean, people are not stupid. They don't want to be treated like they are.
If you read through that Washington Post piece about Mike Lee, the very business leaders who created him as a political candidate, who supported his run and got him elected, are saying on the record in the Washington Post they've jumped to the other side. And they said, this is not why we sent you to Washington. We're a pragmatic state. I'm running a business. I don't need you taking me to the brink. He's down 10%
This
since
is
the
a
shutdown.
nice, likable guy with a lot of talent.
Mike Lee is one of my favorite guys in Washington.
But-
He really is. He's a wonderful man. And the good news for Mike Lee is I don't think he's up again until like 2028. So
Well, that is good news. You got a lot of
Mike Lee
work to
will
do.
be fine. He will figure out a way through this. But people running in 2014, they've got a real problem.
Yeah, but his numbers, though, he was at 50% 16 days ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever the shutdown started, and now he's down to 40%. And, you know, the Democrats see an opening nationally. As you guys know, the DCCC on Monday sent this letter to 1,000 business leaders, said, hey, we're the ones who saved the economy here. 2/3 of Republicans in the House voted to destroy the economy. We're your guys if you want to preserve your businesses.
Real quick,
And if
Robert.
I'm not mistaken, how does Mike Lee get to Washington? He beat a sitting Republican senator, Senator Bennett, who everyone thought, oh my gosh, if this guy isn't conservative enough,
Right.
like, you know, how in the world do we survive? But it is interesting if we have reached that sort of inflection point.
I wonder. Take a look, because the fallout doesn't stop there. Nationally, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas has seen his favorable rating fall 7 points to 23%. His unfavorable marks jumped 6 points to 42%. He's taking a hit even among conservatives. That's according to CNN and opinion research. The poll also shows 64% of Americans have an unfavorable view of the GOP. That's an all-time high. And unfavorable views of the Tea Party are at record highs as well. Only 28% see the movement in a positive light.
Wow, that's yeah.
Yeah, the polling also shows frustration with government as a whole, reaching some pretty stunning levels. A CBS News poll shows 3 out of 4 people believe they don't have as much say in what the government does, and 85% disapprove of Congress. That is the highest level
Who are the 9?
since the poll began in 1977.
The same people who like,
Yeah, well, like
used to
them.
give Hugo
Right.
Chavez
It's
approval
It's
rating.
them and their
I
families.
approve of it.
Neither party has much to brag about. Just 18% approve of the GOP and 31%.
Will you look at that job approval for the Republican
Come on now,
Party
people.
is at 18%.
And 31% for Democrats.
18%, Caddy, is just absolute. I mean, and here's the thing. I wonder if there are going to be any rational voices that have been supporting this strategy, still trying to defend what happened. This is devastating. Record low numbers from Gallup, record low numbers from NBC Wall Street Journal, record low numbers from CBS, an 18% approval rating nationally for my party and Ted Cruz. Now, here's the difference between Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. Mike Lee's not trying to be president. Mike Lee's trying to be a good conservative senator. And some would say he overshot his mark. Ted Cruz, I mean, he wants to be president, but he's got Palin-like numbers now, with approvals in the 20s and disapproval in the 40s. That's like really hard
And
to
like
turn
Palin,
around.
big crowds.
You know, if you are a Democrat or a Republican, hopefully you want the best interests of the country, right? You want the country to be able to run itself. And if part of what is going to get you there is the Tea Party having some of this craziness taken out of it, where it just shuts down the government, brings everything to a long jam, in a way, those numbers may be the beginning of a turnaround.
Of a new opportunity.
A new opportunity in the functioning of American government. The question is, how do you square that against Ted Cruz going home and getting his 8-minute standing ovation?
Well,
All of those individual members who go back to their districts and still feel all I care about is my tiny microcosm of America, and they still love me in my district.
I think we're moving.
Maybe we move beyond that.
Past that point. These numbers are so devastating that it is hard for people that it doesn't matter who they write for. I saw somebody write in the National Review yesterday, somebody who's pretty respected with the National Review, talking about how, hey, this was a great strategy, and if Republicans had only stood shoulder to shoulder with them, then everything would have been okay. That sort of thinking needs to be driven to the side and delegitimized, because it's just it's not borne out by any of the numbers.
Yeah.
And like you said, no matter what happened, the president was going to veto this.
Exactly, and people know that, but it's not like a secret.
People aren't stupid.
Question for you.
Okay.
You know, everyone's, when they're on you definitely being interviewed by the press. You know, politicians or their spokespeople say, oh, we don't look at polls, we go with our gut and blah, blah, blah. You're in Congress, you get numbers like this. What's your staff saying to you?
So here's the
behind
deal.
the scenes.
So let's take this to guns. Heidi Heitkamp is our favorite example of the year. She's in a state, 94% of people in the state of North Dakota, they support background checks for criminals.
Right.
North Dakota people are smart people.
They're not
good,
no,
conservative, solid,
a lot of jobs there,
smart Republican people. But Heidi Heitkamp freaks out because 3% of the people call her office and they're screaming for a couple of weeks, saying,
rookie move.
You're going to take my guns, and your black helicopter's going to come and get my billy goats and my
Okay.
yeah, that's for you, Jazz. And so anyway,
on Twitter.
Yeah, Jazz Shaw. I always say, don't worry. We're
not for the people of North Dakota.
The black helicopters are not coming to get your goats and your sheep and everything else. He doesn't like that.
Oh my Lord.
So anyway, but you hear those phone calls and you freak out. Right? Because if it comes one after another, pretty soon you learn when the new staff member runs back and says, everybody's good. I say, okay, give it a week. Let's see what happens. But then your donors that are talking to the Washington Post today, that put you there, because I can tell you I wouldn't have been in Congress without, like, Charlie Hilton.
Right.
If Charlie Hilton called me up, I don't listen to anybody. Charlie Hilton called me up and said, Scarborough, you're crazy. I'm crazy, but you're really crazy, and you're going to hurt business. I'll listen to those people because they stood with me when nobody else stood with me. And so I really do think you're going to start seeing a nuancing of this, because I think you're going to see a turn from Mike Lee and from Ted Cruz, because they understand they overshot their mark.
Well, when it comes to support for people's own party, Republicans are just at 39% and Democrats are at 61%. What recovery? The sluggish economic recovery may be putting future action by the Federal Reserve on hold as well.
Yeah, I know. Willie, so these numbers are taken as a whole.
Yeah. This was the delayed jobs report. It showed 148,000 jobs added for the month. That was below the pace during the first half of last year. The markets like the news, though. The Fed will most likely keep interest rates low by leaving its controversial bond buying program in place through the end of the year. But for an increasing number of Americans, signs pointing to an economy that's getting worse and not better. According to a new CBS poll, 38% say the economy still getting worse. That is up 11 points from last month and the highest number in 2 years. Wow. Only 21% say the economy is getting better.
And by the way, Willie, Robert, you wanted to say something here. Those 38% who think things are getting worse, they're blaming like the government shutdown.
And I think there's probably good economic statistics that would bolster their fear.
$24 billion lost.
$24 billion in economic output that's lost. A renewed crisis of confidence in how the economy is going, and quite frankly, whether or not people are going to do things that are rational to fix it. And can you imagine, there is a can-kicking element to this agreement. Imagine if we'd have simply kicked this can to right before Christmas, what it would do to what retailers will expect to be a big shopping season. So, it is. And I think you layer that all on top of, and I think what people really see in these polls, I think Willie said it is, this was for nothing. Nobody thought this strategy was going to work. Nobody thought they had somehow, dug up the secret map to buried treasure. This thing was ill-fated from the get-go.
Robert, it was predicted. Yeah. And I won't even say the litany of people who agreed. I will just say the Wall Street Journal editorial page, every chance they got, said, guys, don't do this.
Yeah.
You're going to hurt the party. You're going to hurt the conservative cause, and you're going to hurt business. The Wall Street Journal warned them. Forget about me. I won't talk about me, or Scott Walker, or Charles Krauthammer, or Paul Ryan, or all of these other people. Like, I can't imagine.
Ryan votes against the deal.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Ryan votes against the deal. So
he's running in 2016.
I was going to say there's certainly.
But I'll tell you this. Paul Ryan wouldn't have voted against the deal if he had thought that actually the government would have shut down.
No, that's probably.